This occurred several months ago when I was shopping at a dollar store. I had gone to the local dollar store by my house just to get a few items. It's always a quick and easy in and out there because the store is usually not that busy. On this night in particular, there were a few more people than usual, but still far less than the nearest grocery store. I walked in and grabbed a basket and started going down the aisles. I was in probably the second one when I noticed this one man walking past me. The reason I took notice was because he was walking really fast. He too was holding a shopping basket and it had several items in it. The man looked sort of dirty. He had a very short haircut, but was wearing old baggy jeans and a t-shirt that was ripped. He was also wearing socks with flip-flops. He whizzed past me, and then I heard him go into the next aisle. I looked to my left and soon saw him zoom past and go into another aisle. It seemed like the guy was trying to speed run a shopping trip through the entire store. I just went back to my shopping and didn't notice him for several minutes. I think that I was in the next aisle when I heard the man approaching again. I knew it was him because I heard him flip-flopping really fast around the corner. He came into my aisle and walked right up to me, then stopped. When he did, he asked me if I could pay for his basket. I looked down and saw it now overflowing with a bunch of random items. "Sorry, but no," I said to him. Then he turned and zoomed off, going away from me. I heard him go into the next aisle over and ask the same question to somebody else. They also declined, and then he walked away from them. I wondered why the guy was doing that, but I returned to my shopping. But maybe 5 minutes after that, I was still shopping, and the guy approached me again. This time, I was in a more open area between a few aisles. He asked me once more to pay for his basket. This time, he seemed almost angry, and the way he said it was almost in a threatening way. I said no again. The man then dumped his entire basket onto the ground. All of the items scattered, and then he said loudly, "What's your problem, man?" I was thinking that the guy must be on some kind of drugs or something. He then started repeating himself, asking what my problem was. But each time that he did, he got louder and louder. Soon, he was yelling. Some people inside started to take notice. I didn't really say anything and just tried to walk away. He followed me as I did, though. I asked him to leave me alone, which only caused him to ask me what my problem was again. He just kept saying, "What's your problem, man?" This went on for more than a minute. Soon, an employee approached us and asked the man to quiet down. He refused, saying that he would not, and the employee told him that he had to leave. At first, the man said no, but then he changed his mind. He said fine and then started walking away. I think that everybody in the vicinity did a sigh of relief when they heard that. But before leaving, the man stopped and then took off his flip-flops and socks. He then threw them in my direction, thankfully missing me. Then he turned and left the store. After he was gone, somebody said to call the police. The guy was gone now though, so I don't think anybody did. I finished my shopping, checked out, and left. Luckily, I didn't see the guy again after that. It made for my craziest trip to the dollar store by far. When I was younger, I worked at a dollar store called Family Dollar. It was one of my first jobs, and I was 17 years old. I lived at home during this time with my parents in a neighborhood that was really close to work. I could go there just by taking a few sidewalks, and it took maybe 10 minutes to walk there. So most of the time, I would walk to and from work. I did not have a car yet anyways. So one time, I worked until 9 o'clock at night. It had been a pretty typical shift to that point, and I clocked out and left when I was done. I began walking home along the quiet streets. The street directly in front of the Family Dollar was somewhat busy during the day, but not really at night. Then the roads behind the Family Dollar were mostly residential and usually very quiet. We lived just a few blocks behind it. Normally, when I would walk home, there would be nobody else on the sidewalk, but on this night, a man was following me. I first noticed him probably 2 minutes into the walk. I heard the footsteps a ways back, and I looked over my shoulder. I saw a man walking, but I actually recognized him. He had been inside of the dollar store earlier in the day. In fact, He had come to my register where I was a cashier. Except this guy had been there much earlier. I'm talking like 5 hours earlier, and I hadn't seen him come back inside the store or anything since then. So this seemed sort of strange to me. I kept walking, and when I turned to go down another street, he followed me. I was starting to get nervous. I really wasn't that far away from home, so this was becoming more and more of a problem. Soon I reached my street. I turned to go down it and just hoped that the man wouldn't do the same. But he did. I couldn't go to my house, so I went to the end of the street and then started to head for the street behind my house. The man followed me the entire way. After walking down that street, I quickly turned a corner. The man was not right behind me or anything, so it would take probably 20 seconds for him to reach the corner and then be able to see me. So in the short time that he couldn't see me, I ran into a neighbor's yard and then cut through their backyard. After going behind their house, I cut through a couple more yards and then I was in my backyard. I quickly went around to my house and went inside. I was out of breath from running and my heart was racing from the experience, but I felt much better now that I was safe. I watched out of the front windows for a while to see if the man would walk past, and to my surprise, I did end up seeing him walking down the street. I didn't think that was a coincidence. Luckily, he did not go into our yard or anything, so I was confident that he didn't know where I lived. I told my parents about it, and they told me that I should drive to work next time. My mom did not need to use her car during the time of my next shift, and said that I could use it. Even though it would take less than a minute to drive there, I did. The next time I worked was 2 days later. I once again worked another shift that ended at around 9 o'clock at night. During that time, I was working as a cashier, and a few hours into this shift, everything was pretty quiet. I happened to look over though, and I noticed the man who had followed me home entering the store. When I saw him, I got really nervous. I didn't know what he was going to do. The man went into some random aisle and then went out of my sight. I was dreading having to ring him up when he checked out. I tried my best to just ignore it and tried to think about other things. But after a while, I noticed the man leaving. He did not buy anything and didn't check out. I felt relieved. For the rest of my shift, I didn't see him. So on this night, when I got off, I left the store and I went to my mom's car in the parking lot. When I got inside, I started up the engine and began leaving. But when I was driving out of the parking lot, I saw the lights turn on from another car in the lot, and then that one started to leave. Instantly, I got paranoid and was worried that this was the same man. And when I took a left and headed to my street, the car behind me also took a left. I drove to my street and turned onto it, and so did the car behind me. I just knew that this was the same guy. I drove past my house and then went to the street behind me once again. This time though, I left that street and started driving to try to find the local police station. I had to look up directions, but was able to make it there within about 10 minutes. When I pulled into the parking lot, the car behind me was still there, but did not pull in after me. I parked and went into the police station and reported everything. Of course, I had no proof that the person in the car behind me was the same man, but I had more than a hunch. I also did not get the license plate. I couldn't see it in the dark, but I was hoping that the police would be able to do something. I did not want to get followed home from work again. After speaking with police, I called my parents, and I told them about what had happened. Then I went home. The next time I worked, I was really worried that I would be followed again or see the man or something. I knew to call the police if I noticed him again though. When I got to work, I told my coworker about the story, and surprisingly, my coworker Tori seemed to know the man that I was talking about. Tori was older than me and worked at the dollar store full time. When I described the man, she said that it sounded a lot like a guy that she kind of knew. She told me that he was a creep and had a mutual friend with her. After work that night, I was extremely careful and looked all around. Tori even walked to my car with me, and luckily I was not followed home or anything. The next time that I worked after that was several nights later. When I got to work, Tori was working as well. She told me that the man she knew, who was also likely the same man who had followed me, had been arrested. She said that apparently he was driving with drugs in his car and led the police on a chase for a while. When I saw a picture of him, I confirmed that it was the same man. It was a huge relief, and I went to the police after work and told them that that was the same guy who had followed me. This was a long time ago now, but I will never forget it. I only worked at the Family Dollar for a few months and then quit. Looking back, that was definitely the scariest thing to ever happen to me when I worked there. A few years back, when I had recently graduated from high school, I was hanging out with my friend Josh at his house. We played video games until like 10 o'clock at night or so. Then I got tired and went back to my place. I lived only a few blocks away, so I had walked there from my parents' house. As I was on my way back, I passed by this little dollar store that was in town. I was pretty thirsty, so I walked around to the front and went inside to get something to drink. I hadn't actually been to this store before, but I had drove and walked past it all the time. It just looked a little cheap and run down to me. When I got inside the place, it didn't seem very nice. It was sort of cluttered and old looking. Nobody else was in there though, so I walked right over to the fridge, grabbed a drink, and then made my way to the register. It seemed strange in there because half of the lights were off, and when I got to the register, there was nobody there. I looked around wondering where the employees were. I seemed to be the only person in the entire store at all. I looked behind the counter and nobody was there. I set my drink near the register and then took a few steps away. Just then, I heard a voice come from behind me. I looked back over at the counter, and there was now a tall man standing there. He asked me if I was ready to check out. I jumped when I saw him. It was like he had just suddenly appeared. There wasn't a back room right behind the counter that he could have come from, and I had looked behind it before, and if he was ducking below it, I would have seen him there as well. I just said yes, and then paid for my drink. I then started to walk away. I looked back once again, but the man was now gone. Nobody was behind the counter. I was so confused, and I don't know what happened. I felt kind of creeped out by the whole thing. I started just walking home, and looked back one last time. I now saw the man standing outside the store about 10 feet from the door, just staring at me. It really gave me the creeps, and I walked faster and went the rest of the way home. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. I later found out that the store closed at 9 every night, and I had gone there way past 10 p.m. That just makes it even weirder. This story takes place just last week. It was a Saturday evening just before sunset. I went to the dollar store just to get a couple of snacks. I had been there a number of previous times, and it was pretty close to my apartment. The store was called Dollar Tree, and everything inside was around $1. So I got to the store and parked my car. Then I got out. I was walking into the store, and literally in the first aisle when I saw a man approaching me. He was wearing a green shirt with the Dollar Tree logo on it. The man approached me and said that I wasn't allowed to be in here. I was really confused. He told me to get out of the store, and I asked him why. He said because I was banned. Now, I knew for a fact that I was not banned, and I had never had a bad interaction with anybody there. I said he must have the wrong guy. The man told me again to leave or he was going to call the police on me. I really couldn't believe it. I asked the guy what I did to get banned. He told me that I knew exactly what I did, and then motioned for me to get out of the store. At this point, I really didn't know what was going on, but I figured that I would just leave. The guy seemed to be pretty angry about it and was not going to listen to me no matter what I said. I started walking out of the store, and the man followed me the entire way. We both made it outside, and the man told me to leave the property. I asked him once more why I was banned, but he did not answer me. Instead, he told me not to get smart with him and asked me if I wanted to try him. I was not interested in fighting this guy, but as I was starting to walk back to my car, I noticed out on the road a police car starting to approach. The man who was with me turned and just took off running, going around the side of the Dollar Tree building. Behind it were some other businesses. I was still extremely confused, and now even more so at this point. The police car then pulled into the parking lot. I just stood there. After the police parked, 2 officers got out. One of them asked me if I had seen the guy who was pretending to work there. I realized then that the guy who kicked me out of the store was probably a fake employee. I guess the police hadn't seen him running away when they were driving up. I said yes and told the police where the man had ran. One of the officers headed in that direction, and the other officer went inside. I went back in the dollar store and found an employee. When I told her of what had happened, she said that the guy had been pretending to work there and was harassing multiple customers. When they asked him to leave and he did not, they called the police. Then he went out of their sight and they thought that maybe he had left. Apparently, he came back to harass me. I was able to complete my shopping. By the time that I was done, the police had left to catch up with the guy wherever he had gone. I was just glad that I was not actually banned, and I realized what had happened. That man's behavior was very bizarre. That experience was something that I will never forget. A while back, I went to my local dollar store to get some snacks. It was a nice sunny Saturday morning, and I was going to have a nice relaxing weekend. I didn't have much food, but they sold good snacks for cheap at the local dollar store. I decided to walk there because of how close it was, just a few blocks. Plus, the weather was really nice. So I set out from my house, and I made it to the dollar store within about 10 minutes. After arriving inside, I started looking around to decide what I wanted to get. The store was relatively quiet. There were a few other people shopping around, but not many. After maybe 10 minutes inside though, I had picked out a few things, but was still looking. That's when this woman approached me. I had never seen her before. She walked right up to me like she knew me though. Then she asked me something really surprising. The woman asked if I had an extra room or some place that she could stay. I said no, I did not, because I didn't. I asked her why she was just randomly asking me that. The woman told me that she had just moved into town and her apartment lease didn't start for 2 more days. I suggested that she could stay in a hotel. To this, she said that she didn't want to spend that much money. I was surprised that she was asking random people at a dollar store to stay at their house, or at least that she asked me. The woman did not appear to be homeless or anything like that. It was just shocking. I said that I was sorry, but I couldn't help her out there, as I didn't have any space. She seemed disappointed, but then walked off. I then decided to finish up my shopping and go. It was way too early in the morning for a random stranger to be asking to stay at my place. So I went and checked out and then headed back to my house. My neighborhood is just behind the dollar store, so it wouldn't take that long to get back. I walked along the nice sunny sidewalks and eventually made it back to my place. I got inside, turned on the TV, and cracked open a cold drink. Just then, there was a knock at the front door. I really didn't know who it could be, and I walked over and was about to open it up. At the last second though, I decided to look before answering. And I'm glad I did, because I saw the same woman standing there on the front step. The woman from the dollar store who asked to stay at my house. I realized that the only explanation for her being here was that she must have followed me home, and that was creepy. I chose not to answer. I didn't know why this woman had chose me, I guess, to stay at my house. She knocked again, this time louder. I still didn't answer. After a couple of minutes' pause, she knocked one more time at the front door. This time, it went on for about 30 seconds straight. She also started yelling that she knew I was home and to open the door. I didn't listen to her. At one point, she tried opening the door herself, but it was locked. I thought that she would get the hint and leave, but she didn't. She stayed there for a while, and then she walked around into the backyard and knocked on my back door. I still didn't answer. After hearing her knock on the back door for a while, it soon stopped. Then she went back to the front, but she didn't knock. She was just standing around. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, though, I called the police. When they got there, the woman was still there. She claimed that she lived there and I had kicked her out. I told the police that she didn't live there, which I was quickly and easily able to prove. The police ended up talking to the woman and making her leave me alone. Then everybody left. I was glad that things had been cleared up. It was the craziest thing. Something had to have been wrong with that woman. I don't know why she chose to seemingly mess with me. It was very strange. This is a story of something really scary that happened to me while shopping a few years ago. I went to a Dollar General store in the town I work in after I got off of work to pick up a few household items. I really like shopping at those stores. They're usually not very crowded, and it's a good place to get basic things since they have really good prices. I'd been inside for a few minutes and already got most of the things that I needed. When I went into the aisle for the last of what I needed, I noticed there was a man just standing in the middle of it, pacing back and forth, babbling some kind of gibberish. His clothes were extremely dirty, and his pants and hoodie were both full of holes. He had his hood up over his head, so I really didn't get a good look at his face, but I could see that he had an unkempt beard. I had to go around him and couldn't help but notice he smelled horrible. I'm not one to judge people, but the smell was just too bad and even made me gag a little. The man just gave off a bad vibe overall, too. There was music playing in the store, and all of a sudden, the man randomly started singing along with it. He wasn't singing along with the words, but was kind of laughing to the tune of the song while singing simultaneously. It was by far the most random thing I'd ever seen anyone do. I didn't know who in their right mind would act like that in public, but I just brushed it off like whatever and tried to finish my shopping. The man kept doing it and was now dancing to the music as he got closer to me. I decided I'd go to the next aisle over to put some distance between myself and the man. I hoped that if I just ignored him, he would either get bored of it or find someone else to bother. It was turning into a really sketchy situation, but I didn't think it was worth confronting the guy over it. I killed some time by just looking over everything in the aisle and thought maybe the man would be gone so I could go back for what I needed. Then I saw the man again, and he was following another customer who was a middle-aged man. The guy was still singing and dancing to the music. I could tell the other customer was getting annoyed and trying to ditch the man too. Then the guy practically leaned over to the other customer's shoulder and was singing as loud as he could. It startled the other customer, and he turned around and said, "What's your problem, you weirdo?" That must have set off a trigger within the man, and he then started shouting and cursing at me at the top of his lungs. The other customer just looked at the man with a stunned look on his face. It seemed like he was getting ready to fight the man when he started pounding his chest like a gorilla and screamed. The other customer screamed and took off running away from him. I watched as the man chased him all around throughout the store, in and out of aisles, and knocking things off the shelves as they went. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. I didn't know if the guy was high on something, drunk, or had a mental health problem, but the fact that he had completely lost his mind was plain to see. His mood had gone completely 180. The other customer ran in front of the aisle I was in, with the crazy man still after him. Then the crazy man tripped and fell when his foot caught on the bottom of a shelf. He noticed me when he got back up and then pointed at me. He made a noise that I don't even know how to describe, and I would have thought a human couldn't make such a sound. I screamed and ran for it. The crazy guy picked up an item in a box off the shelf and heaved it at me. Luckily, it didn't come anywhere close to hitting me and just fell to the floor, which probably broke whatever was inside. As I was running out of there, I came across the store manager who came to investigate all the commotion. He asked what in the blue F was going on in here, understandably angry about the disturbance. I said there's a crazy man who's been trying to attack another customer and myself. Just then, the crazy man saw us. He made that awful noise again and charged us. The manager said to get out of his store now. That didn't faze the man at all, and he kept going towards us at full speed. The manager picked up his foot, and as the guy reached him, he delivered a karate-style kick to the crazy man, which caught him square in the chest. It dropped the crazy man and knocked him out for a few moments. The manager asked me if I was okay, and I said that I thought I was, still in shock of what had just happened. He then told me to make a run for the exit, and he was going to evacuate the entire store as well as call the police. I didn't waste any time in making a run for the exit. While I was on the way out, I heard the manager announce over the store intercom for everyone to please evacuate the store immediately for your own safety. When I got outside, I saw a couple of police cars come flying into the parking lot. It turned out the other customer the crazy man chased got out after the crazy man set his sights on me and called the police himself. It was a pretty big town, so their police department was able to get officers to the scene super fast. A few other customers came running out of the store along with the employees and manager. The officers got out and the manager told them the crazy man was still inside, destroying everything. We could see glimpses of him through the glass, running around in there and laying waste to the store. It looked like a tornado had ripped through the place. The officers ran inside and a few other police cars arrived to the scene as they entered, along with an ambulance. The second wave of officers ran in to help while the paramedics checked on everyone to see if anybody needed medical attention. We all watched and waited for them to come out with the guy. In the meantime, the manager kept apologizing to everyone about the whole ordeal and made sure that nobody was hurt. I was glad that he was there to put a stop to the crazy man's rampage long enough for everybody to get out safely. It took a while, but all the officers finally came out, dragging the crazy man with them. He was still trying to fight the officers and making his disturbing noises. They had put a lot of restraints on him and put a spit hood over his face too. After they finally got him in the back of one of their cars, the officers came over to make sure we were all okay. They said that when they found the crazy man inside, he was defecating in the middle of one of the aisles. The crazy man even tried to fight the officers, and they ended up having to use a taser on him a few times to make the arrest. They also discovered that he vandalized the restroom by stuffing a bunch of toilet paper and paper towels in the toilet and sink, making them both overflow. One officer said the crazy man was most likely on heavy drugs, and that's what made him act like he did. We all gave the officers our statements for what happened, and our contact information if they had any more questions. The manager went back inside with some of the officers to get the footage from the store's surveillance cameras and to inspect all of the damage. The other arresting officers drove the man out of the parking lot and took the crazy guy away. We all felt sorry for them because it couldn't have been a very pleasant ride with him in the car. I decided I might as well forget about my shopping, and I went home to try to collect myself. I was still shaken up from the whole thing. I followed the news for the next few days and found out the guy's name and that he was in fact under the influence of drugs when he came into the store. He was being held in the town's jail until his court date. I never heard what ended up happening to him after that, but I was just glad that he was in custody where he belonged and couldn't hurt anyone. Hopefully, he got the help that he needed while he was there too. The Dollar General had to be closed for a few days to clean up the damage, and so the employees could recover from the trauma. I never have gone back to that Dollar General since that incident, and I don't think I ever will. I'm sure that the man was banned from ever going into that store again. It just brings up bad memories for me, and I couldn't help but think that someday the crazy man would return to seek some kind of horrible retribution. The whole thing was a really traumatizing experience for me, and it's made me a lot more leery whenever I go out shopping ever since. That just goes to show you that you never know what people are capable of, and how quickly things can take a turn just going about your daily routine. There's a local dollar store in my neighborhood that's pretty close to my apartment. It's closer to my place than other stores like Target, Walmart, or grocery stores. So I used to go there basically all the time. I would say I was there twice a week at least just to get whatever I needed. It would take like 2 or 3 minutes to drive to there from my place. The store was like most dollar stores and was somewhat small. It usually wasn't that busy either, which was also nice. So one evening, I went to the dollar store to get a few things. I walked inside, and like normal, it wasn't that busy. There were just a few people here and there shopping throughout the store. I began looking for the first thing that I was going to buy when a woman approached me. This woman had dark hair and was short, and she wore glasses and a black coat. After approaching me, she said that she saw me in here all the time. I said yes, I did shop here quite a bit. The woman then described some things that I usually bought. She said how she always saw me get the off-brand Gatorade and the one brand of chips that I would always get. Now this seemed kind of weird to me. I mean, how close was she watching me to memorize all this stuff? I just said yes and sort of laughed it off. The conversation ended shortly after with the woman saying she would see me later and then walking away. I continued my shopping and did not see the lady until almost the end of my shopping trip. When I was almost done, I remember I was in an aisle and I happened to look out randomly. I saw the woman walking by to another aisle and filming me with her phone. She was trying to hide it, but doing a terrible job. I could see the phone pointed right at me. The woman did not look at me and walked past, but then she started looking at a product on a shelf about 20 feet away from me. Even though she was looking at some items and not in my direction, she kept her phone facing me the entire time. I was so confused, and I thought about confronting her, but instead, I decided to just check out and leave. When I started walking away, I saw the woman angle her phone to keep it on me as I walked. When I looked over, she finally quickly moved it away. Once more, I thought about confronting her, but decided not to. As weird as this was, it didn't bother me too much, as long as something like this didn't happen again. I headed up and paid for my items and then left the store. The woman did not follow me or anything, and was still inside when I left. So after getting out of the dollar store, I headed back home. It was probably just 2 or 3 days later that I was at the store again. I had sort of forgotten about the woman, and this time that I shopped there, I don't remember noticing her at all. But the next time I was there, she was back again. This was maybe a few days after that, So roughly a week after our last interaction. It was a little bit later at night, and the dollar store was very quiet when I walked in. I did not see the lady inside at all. I was able to go around the store and get the items that I wanted to buy. When I was sort of near the front end of the store though, I noticed something out the front windows. The windows looked out to the parking lot, and you could see a good amount of it. There were maybe 3 or 4 cars in the entire lot. I saw the same woman from before, standing next to my car, and she appeared to be either filming it or taking pictures of it. She was clearly holding her phone right up next to it. She also got my license plates. When I saw this, I decided to leave. I checked out and kept an eye on the woman the whole time. I watched her then try to open one of the doors to my car, but it was locked. Then I left the store. As soon as I made it out of the doors, I just barely saw the woman go behind another nearby car in the parking lot. When I reached my car, I called out to her, asking what she was doing near my vehicle. I got no response. I knew that the woman was hiding behind the car that was about 30 feet away, but she was not answering me. I did not figure it to be a good idea to approach her or to say anything else. Instead, I just got into my car and left. I drove home and then decided that I would not go back to that dollar store for a while, and I haven't been back since then. This was about 6 months ago. I've not seen the lady at all, and I'm hoping that I never see her again. Several years ago, I used to live sort of near a dollar store. It was about 10 minutes away from my apartment, and slightly closer than most of the other stores in the shopping area that was nearby. I really didn't go there much, but I occasionally would to get certain products. One night, I decided to go out and get a birthday card for my sister because it was her birthday later that week. I figured the best deal would be at the dollar store, so I drove there. The dollar store was called Dollar Tree, and I walked inside to see that they did in fact have a really good selection of birthday cards inside. The store wasn't too busy, and I was able to look through a bunch of cards before I finally found one that I liked for my sister. After I got it, I walked over and checked out with the cashier, then left the store. I walked out to my car in the quiet, dark parking lot, then got inside my SUV and started to drive away. I had my music going like I always did, which was connected to my phone through Bluetooth. But about halfway home, I thought I heard a strange noise. I turned down my music and listened. I didn't hear anything for a few seconds. Then I heard it again. It was coming from the back of my car. I looked behind me. I saw in the far back of my car, behind the second row of seats, the head of a man emerged, and I was looking right at his face for a good second. I screamed and immediately pulled the car over to the side of the road. I'm not sure why I did that, but I was purely reacting to the situation. Unfortunately, I was driving down a quiet road on the way back home, and there were really no places I could go to. It was pretty much just woods and fields on both sides. Once my car was pulled over, I did have the presence of mind to take the keys out, and when I got out and off the road, I went into the woods. I took off running, and as I did, I heard the back of my car start to swing open. I looked, and just for another second, I saw a man running into the woods towards me. The man was wearing a black sweatshirt with the hood up and jeans. I turned away after seeing him, and it made me run faster. I had a good 40 or 50 feet on him, and I dodged tree branches and ran into a bunch of bushes and tall grass and things like that. I was running fast, and I had no idea where I was going, but I could hear the man running behind me. He didn't really seem to be getting closer though, and eventually I heard him less and less. I slowly turned my sprint into a jog, and then I noticed something in the distance. It was a house. The house had a light on, and I ran to the front door and started pounding on it. I didn't see the man behind me, and I was hoping he wouldn't catch up. I kept knocking on the door, and after like 30 seconds, it finally opened. A woman opened the door, and I told her what had happened. She didn't want to let me in her house, though. I'm not sure if she believed my story and thought I was a creep or something. I couldn't really blame her, and she was about to close her door in my face when I asked her if she could just call the police for me. She agreed to do that and called the police. I waited near her house, constantly looking at the entrance of the woods in case the man would return. Eventually, the police arrived, and I told them the whole story. We all went back to my car, which was still on the side of the road with the back of it wide open. They didn't find the man, so I guess he ran away somewhere. Whoever that guy was must have snuck in my car when I was in the Dollar Tree. I guess it was unlocked or something. I'm not sure if he was planning to attack me or what, but I'm glad I saw him when I did. A few years back, I worked at a dollar store in my city. It was like 5 minutes away from my apartment, and I worked as a cashier. After having the job for several months, I was working one night like any other. Usually, we had 1 or 2 employees working at once because the store was small. I was by myself on this night, and it was maybe 4 or 5 p.m. There were about 2 or 3 customers in the store at once on average. I remember that a man walked in as I stood behind the counter of one of the 2 check lanes that we had. After he walked inside, he went down one of the first aisles and disappeared. Another customer came and checked out about a minute later. Probably 20 minutes or so later, the man checked out. He came up to me and set down just one drink. I don't remember exactly what it was. The man had long hair and was wearing sunglasses, I remember. After he paid, he left the store. The interaction was really nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't say much at all, if anything, to me. But I remember that after he left the store, he was hanging around by the front for a while. I could see out of the front window to the sidewalk out front and a bit of the parking lot. We were also connected to some other businesses as part of a strip mall. None of the businesses ever seemed to be all that busy though. So I kept working, and every now and then would see the guy. He was just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk out front. I didn't really think too much of it though. I checked out some more customers, and people would come and go from the store, but the man remained out front. Eventually, hours went by. Soon it was nighttime, and the store got even quieter. I noticed that the guy was still standing out front. What was he doing here for so long? I really didn't know, but I also didn't really care that much. Sometimes he would look over in the window, and I thought he might come back in the store, but he didn't. Only 1 or 2 more customers came in for the rest of the time that we were open. Then it was time for me to close up and leave. I'd been working by myself that day because business was slow. When it was 9 o'clock, I locked the doors and saw the guy look over when I did. Then I clocked out, did a few last-minute things, and left the store by probably 9:15. After walking out, the guy was still standing there, about 15 feet to my right. I went to my car in the parking lot and got inside. Then I started driving back home. I needed to get gas though, and I stopped about halfway back. I went to a smaller neighborhood gas station on a corner. When I got there, I got out of my car and started filling it with gas. About a minute into doing that, and I saw this older beat-up looking car enter the gas station. The car was blue and also pretty small. It did not drive to a gas pump, but instead parked in one of the few spaces that was on the side. I happened to notice the driver and realized that it was the same guy from the dollar store, the man with long hair and sunglasses. Now, at first, I thought this was just a coincidence, because the gas station wasn't that far away from the dollar store, but still, it was kind of weird. I mean, this guy was standing around outside for hours, and then when I left, he leaves. When my gas tank was full, I decided to go inside of the gas station. I was just going to get something to eat to have when I got home. The man was still inside of his car at this point and just sitting there. I left my car and walked inside the store. I was browsing around looking for something and noticed the same man walking in. Now I was worried. It seemed a little too strange for this guy to suddenly come inside the store now that I did. I left right there, not even bothering to buy anything. When I did, I saw the guy start to walk out after me. I quickly hurried to my car, started the engine, and drove away. As I was getting out of the parking lot, I saw the guy getting inside of his car. I quickly turned down one of the residential streets and turned my headlights off. It was hard to see, but I went down that street and then took a left. The guy would have no way of knowing where I went. He didn't follow me, probably because he couldn't see me. So after that, I was able to drive home, and I made it back okay. After that night, I didn't see the guy for the rest of the time that I worked at the dollar store. I'm not sure why he did what he did that night, but it was very strange. I used to work at a Dollar Tree. I worked there for roughly a year. My time working there was pretty good for the most part. The coworkers were nice, and it usually never really got that busy. I had worked at another store before that would get really busy, and that can be stressful. The Dollar Tree was a little bit easier in my opinion. So anyways, Something kind of weird happened at one point when I worked there. I was working a night shift, and I was actually going to be closing the store. My coworker was leaving about an hour before close, and then I had the responsibility of locking up. So earlier in the night, there were a few customers shopping around inside. At one point, this man came to my register to check out. I think he just got like one item and then left. However, less than 30 minutes later, he was back again. I remembered seeing him again, and I wondered why he was back, but it was not a huge deal. After being in the store for a little while, he once more went to my check lane. I thought about mentioning how he had just been here, but I didn't. He once more got just an item or two. I can't remember what, but then he was on his way and left. The guy had really short hair, was about average height, and he didn't really make any conversation during his time at the register. Well, he was back yet again for a third time maybe an hour or so later. This was pretty strange. I still didn't say anything though. Once more, the man bought just like one thing and then left. By now, it was getting later and approaching closing time. I worked for a few more hours, and then it was time to close the store. After locking the door and doing some final cleaning, I left. When I got out to the parking lot, I saw the same guy. He was standing in the grass area next to our parking lot. It was one of those grass areas that has a few trees and separates one business's parking lot with another. My car was parked pretty close by. I had sort of a bad feeling when I saw this. There weren't really any other cars that were close by. I didn't know what the man was doing, just standing there. So I walked out to my car, and I soon approached it. At that point, the man turned to me and started to walk closer. As he did, he called out and asked me for a ride. This obviously seemed sketchy to me. I said sorry, but I couldn't, and then I kept walking to the driver's side of my car. The man didn't say anything. However, he appeared to just stay near the grassy area and did not approach any further. Then I got into my car and I left without a problem. So I remember the very next time I worked, the man came inside again. Once more, he bought something and checked out at my register. This time, it was later though, only about 30 minutes before we closed. And once again, I was working by myself now, and I was also going to be closing the store by myself. Over the next 30 minutes, we didn't get any more customers, and when the time came, I went to lock the doors. I remember that right as I was locking the door, I saw the man walking up. He came right up to the doors after I had finished locking them. He tried opening the doors, and then he knocked on them. I told him that we were closed. The man asked if he could just get something real quick. I said sorry, but no, we were closed, and I couldn't allow it. After a few moments, he turned and he walked away down the sidewalk in front of the store. I went and did my usual cleaning, and then I left the store. I didn't see the guy out in the parking lot this time or anything. Then I left and went home. Now, just a couple of nights later, I was at my friend's house. She happened to have the news on TV and was watching it. And this is also really crazy, because I don't normally watch the news, but a story came on and they were talking about how a guy was caught after robbing a store. When they showed his picture, it was the same guy who I had kept seeing at the dollar store. I couldn't believe it. I told my friend all about it. It was so crazy that I kept seeing him at my store. He even asked me for a ride. I'm glad that I didn't give him a ride. I'm also really glad that I didn't let him in the store when I had closed it. Maybe he was planning to rob the Dollar Tree. I don't know for sure, but his strange behavior didn't surprise me when I found out he was a robber. That was the craziest thing that ever happened to me when working at Dollar Tree. I used to work at a dollar store. I was a cashier, but we never really got too busy, so it wasn't uncommon for me to do other stuff around the place. Typically, on weeknights, there were just a few of us working, and sometimes just one. One night, I was working with just my coworker until she left at 9 o'clock because the place was already super quiet and we closed at 10. I agreed to close the place up, and it was an easy hour where I rang up a couple of customers, and then there were no customers in the place at all. I left my register to sweep the floor nearby and hoped nobody else would come in the store for the remaining 20 minutes that we were open. I was almost done sweeping when I heard the front doors to the store opening up. I looked and saw a man wearing a dark blue jacket and baseball cap walk inside. He immediately turned to the right and went behind an aisle out of my view. I finished up my sweeping of the floor and then walked back over to my register to be ready for when the man would check out. Time went by, and and then I announced over the store speaker that we would be closing in 10 minutes. I once again repeated that when we were closing in 5. I looked around the aisles that I could see, but I didn't see the man at all. When it was 10 o'clock, I announced that we were now closed, and he had to come up to the cash register and check out. I waited a couple of minutes, but there was still nothing. I then walked over and locked the entrance door so nobody else would come inside. Then I decided to walk through the store and see where this man was. I went down the first aisle, and he wasn't there. I then went down a few more, but couldn't find him. Finally, I'd been around basically the entire store, and then realized he must have gone to the bathroom. We had our bathrooms in the back corner of the store near the employee break room, and there was a back room there as well where we had extra merchandise. I walked towards there, and as soon as I made it to the little hallway area that was back there, I saw him. It looked like he was almost hiding behind the door that led to our back room. As soon as I saw him, he darted from behind there and ran to the main area of the store. I walked out hoping to see him leave, but I didn't hear him leaving. Instead, I heard movement towards the middle of the store. Then, suddenly, I saw a man jump out from behind another aisle and throw a glass cup at me. I was able to move out of the way and dodge it just in time. I walked back around the side of the store and away from the man and made my way back to the front. I yelled that the man needed to leave now or I was calling the police. I didn't know what his problem was, but he was acting really strange. I didn't hear him leaving, though. I wasn't sure if this guy was insane or what. Then I heard a loud crash come from the area where he was. Now I knew I needed to call the police. But before I could, I heard more noises and watched the man run out of the store. After he had left, I wanted to run over to the door and lock it. But as I was on the way there, I saw him run back inside. He ran out of my sight again. I decided it was best for my safety if I just left the store. So I ran outside, then called the police. I waited inside my car, and eventually they arrived. The police came, and the police went inside the store and were able to get the man. When I went back inside, I saw all the damage that he caused. He made quite a mess, and I stayed late to clean it up. I was just happy everyone was okay. I think the guy was on drugs, or else he was just insane. This is something that happened back when I was 19. During that time period, I lived at home with my parents, and I worked at the local Dollar Tree. I was a part-time employee, and would usually work anywhere from 2 to 4 nights per week. And usually it was always night shifts, many of them closing. Our store was generally pretty quiet, and when we closed, we usually only had 1 or 2 employees working. I remember that one night, after a pretty average shift, I came home and was eating before bed. That night in particular, I had gotten off a little before close, which was 10 p.m., and my coworker had locked the doors and stuff. So it was about 10:30 at this point, and both my parents said goodnight to me and headed off to bed. I was having some pizza and sitting in the living room watching something on TV. After this, I was going to go to bed myself. I was pretty tired from the long day. Now, our living room is at the front end of the house. There's a large window that looks out to the front yard, and you can see the driveway as well. As I was sitting there on the couch, I saw headlights through the window as if somebody was turning into our driveway. I didn't know who it could be. My younger brother was 16 and had his license at the time of the story, but he was home and in his bedroom playing video games. I turned around and looked out the window. I saw a car pulling into the driveway that looked to be a smaller sedan and was a dark color. The car stopped at the back of the driveway, and surprisingly, the headlights then turned off. This was a little creepy to say the least, and I kept watching to see if anybody would get out. But for probably 2 or 3 minutes, nobody did. I could tell that the car was still running. Then, the car backed out of the driveway and drove off. I figured that someone was either lost or had the wrong address or something. Maybe they just wanted to turn around and turned off the lights not to shine them at our house. I continued watching TV and forgot all about it. I kind of got hooked onto the TV show that I was watching, and I wasn't really as tired as I had been just minutes earlier. Probably an hour or so went by. By now, it was almost midnight. I was still sitting there on the couch, and I heard a car coming from outside, and I looked and saw a car pulling into the driveway again. It was the same car as before. Now this was really strange. By this time, the car's engine turned off. My heart started to beat a little faster when it did. Then I heard a door open, and I saw somebody start to get out. I moved from where I was, I wanted to make sure that whoever it was didn't see me and that our front door was locked. I moved over and away from the window and saw that the door was in fact locked. Then, whoever was there made it to the front step. When they did, they tried opening the door. It was really shocking to me, and I went to the window to see who it was. I was careful not to let them see me, and I saw a man standing there. He was a bigger guy with really long, dark, and curly hair. His hair went past his shoulders, and I had never seen him before. This really creeped me out, and I ran to my parents' bedroom and knocked on their door. Meanwhile, I didn't hear any knocking at our front door from the guy who was there. It seemed like he had only tried to enter. After a minute or so, my dad got up and asked me what was going on. I told him about the guy at the front step, and my dad went over to investigate. When we got back to the living room, though, the man wasn't there anymore. I looked out the front window, and his car was gone too. Still, I was afraid that he would return. My dad checked around the house, but there was no sign of anybody. So after that, I went to bed. Nothing else happened that night. The next day, though, I worked again at the Dollar Tree. It was one of my typical shifts, which was 4 to 10 p.m., and at first, things were kind of busy, and I was working with 2 other employees. That soon turned to 1 other employee, and as the night went on, things only got quieter. Then, at about 9 p.m. or so, with the store being extremely quiet, my coworker left. I would be closing the store tonight because my coworker had done it the previous night. So during the final hour, I only recall one lady shopping for a few minutes, and then she left. That is, until probably 9:30. At that point, I saw a man walking into the store. When I saw him, my jaw dropped. I thought that I recognized him from something, and then I realized what it was. He was a big guy with long, dark, and curly hair. Was it the man who was at my house last night? I looked out into the parking lot and saw a smaller car, just like the one that had been in our driveway. This made me extremely nervous. I was all alone inside the store with him. I thought about calling my coworker and asking her to come back, but I decided not to. I tried to play it cool. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe this guy didn't know that it was my house last night, or maybe he didn't know that I worked here. He seemed to be walking around the store, but I couldn't tell exactly where he was. The guy was out of my sight for maybe 5 minutes. Then I saw him appear again towards the front. He wasn't going to buy anything though, and he just left. I was glad to see this. The man walked back out to his car and got inside, but he didn't drive away. I kept an eye on him, and I hoped that he would leave. When a little more time went by and we didn't get any more customers, I decided to lock up and just leave. I wanted to get home and away from this guy. I quickly walked through the store and made sure that everything was fine and nobody else was there. I didn't bother to organize any of the shelves, and I went to lock up. When I got to the doors, the guy's car was still there in the parking lot. After I had finished and was about to walk to my car, I realized that I would have to walk past him. I was parked towards the back of the lot, and the guy was across from me, but closer to the store. There were other stores very close by in the shopping center, but in the parking lot space for Dollar Tree, it was just our 2 vehicles. I decided I would just go for it and began walking to my car, but I took no more than 5 steps before I saw and heard the door start to open to the man's car. Instantly, I turned around and started walking down the sidewalk area in front of the store. There were a few other stores connected to the Dollar Tree, and I suddenly had the idea to go inside one of them. I would feel much safer if I could do that. But the first few stores were closed. Meanwhile, as I walked, I could hear the man walking now behind me. He was a decent ways back, but definitely following me. I didn't bother to look behind me at all. There was a Target store that appeared to probably still be open. The parking lot had a decent amount of cars in it. When I got closer, I saw somebody walking in, and I felt much better. Soon, I had made it to the Target. The man was still walking behind me at about the same following distance. After walking inside Target, the man followed me in. I decided to start walking up and down the aisles. As I did this, I got out my phone and texted my mom. Meanwhile, the man was trailing me a ways back, wherever I would go. My mom texted me back, saying that she could come and pick me up. I thought about trying to get back to my car. In that isolated part of the parking lot, I didn't want to risk it. I asked my mom if she could, and she said that she would be there in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I had to keep walking all around, up and down the aisles of Target. Every time I got into a new area, I would see the man a ways back. I kept looking at my phone over and over, hoping that my mom would be there already. At last, she told me that she was out front in the parking lot. I started walking to the front end of the store, and the man was still behind me. He was maybe about 40 feet back or so, if I had to guess. When I got to the doors and they opened, I could see my mom's car. That's when I started running. I sprinted for her vehicle and I got inside as fast as I could. We both saw the man walking out of Target, and my mom quickly drove away. We were a good distance from where the man's car was, and we were able to make it back home all right without being followed. When we got home, I gave my keys to my dad, and my mom drove him to my car so that he could bring it back to our house. When they got back to my car, luckily the man was gone. I stayed up late that night, hoping that the man wouldn't go to our house again, and luckily he didn't. Since that experience, I never saw him after that. I realized that he probably saw me working that first night that he showed up at my house. I just hadn't seen him at all. I must have not noticed or remembered him. I certainly did when he entered the store that next night, though. I currently work at a Dollar Tree. For anybody that doesn't know, this is a dollar store. Actually, the one that I work at is $1.25 now, but you get the point. So this is an event that took place 2 months ago now. I'm a female and a part-time employee. I work all kinds of different shifts, and it's pretty random. It's really whenever I'm needed, and sometimes I work mornings, other times I work into the night. I'm also trained to do multiple things in the store, like be a cashier and do other tasks. One day I was working a Saturday shift. I think I was working from 1 p.m. until 9 p.m. So when I got to work, I was cashier for a while, but that was only for the first couple of hours. For the next part of my shift, we had 2 other employees working, so they went on the registers and I did some other tasks. We were kind of busy, but the store was not too crowded or anything. I remember that probably around 4 p.m., I had a bad interaction with a man who had entered the store. I had been stocking a shelf in the back and did that for maybe 5 minutes. Then I started walking away when I was done. As I was walking down an aisle near a back corner, there was a man standing in that aisle. I didn't really notice him until he stopped me when I was walking past. He said that he needed help with something at first, but it didn't take long before the man started to say some inappropriate things to me. It started by him basically trying to pick me up, but I wasn't interested. I tried to shake it off, but the man continued talking. It was making me uncomfortable, and I told him to stop. The man was pretty short, had dark hair, and had a somewhat skinny build. I didn't really feel too much in danger because of there being other people in the store and my coworkers there as well. I started just walking away from the guy, but he began to follow me. He was walking and still talking, but talking quietly. He was now telling me not to walk away from him and asking me what my problem was. I walked over to a coworker and the man continued. I told the man to stop, louder now, and told him to leave me alone. When he did not go away, my coworker got involved. At this point, the man finally left and then walked out of the store. I was really glad that he was finally gone. Every now and then we would get really strange customers, but I had never dealt with anything like that before. I really couldn't believe it. After that though, I went back to work and continued. The next few hours went by really well. I actually went back to cashier for a couple hours and then switched with the other employee. By now, I was almost off. I had less than an hour to go in my shift, and it was 8-something at night. The store was much quieter now, and I headed to go organize some shelves. One thing about our store is that many of the shelves get extremely disorganized. I don't know why this is, but I enjoy reorganizing everything and making it look nice. It's something we usually only do when the store is really quiet though. So I walked to this far back corner of the store. The aisle was empty and there was a lot of things needing to be organized. I started on one of the shelves. I was maybe 2 or 3 minutes in when I heard something to my right. So there were these 2 kind of large boxes in the aisle. I'm not sure exactly what had been in them. Maybe a bunch of toy balls or something like that. But it was almost empty. I looked over and then saw the same man from earlier emerging from one of those boxes. I couldn't believe my eyes. He had been hiding inside of it. But before I could do anything, the man jumped out of the box, all while looking right at me. He then started to walk towards me, and I moved away. The guy had to be insane or something. I backed away, but was now in the complete corner of the store. I asked the guy what he was doing. He did not say anything, but kept moving closer. There was a bunch of shopping baskets stacked nearby, and I grabbed one of them as the man got within 5 feet of me. I used it as a shield against him in case he kept coming closer. He got within a few feet, and I held out the basket. I told him very loudly to leave me alone, and he told me to be quiet. I was hoping that my coworker could hear me. The man was still standing there, with just the shopping basket between us. He asked me to leave the store with him, and I said no. As he continued to try to persuade me, I heard my coworker approaching. When she entered the aisle, the man told her to go away. My coworker then threatened to call the police. The man took a few steps away from me and towards my coworker. We both told him to leave over and over. Finally, the man walked out of the store. He walked along the sidewalk out front and then went out of sight. Of course, we were both worried that he would come back or was waiting for us outside. My coworker watched by the door, and I went around the store and realized that there were no other shoppers inside. We decided to lock the doors then and close early to be safe. We called the police, and they came out and we told them everything about the guy. They looked around a little bit, but he was gone. After that, both of us went home. We also reported the man to our other coworkers, and he got banned from the store. Luckily, I haven't seen him since, and I'm hoping that he never comes back. I had a really weird experience when I used to work at a dollar store. The store was called Family Dollar, and I lived only a few blocks away in an apartment. I had a few coworkers at the Family Dollar, but this story revolves around one in particular. It was a guy named Chris. He was a big guy and around my age. Sometimes we would work at the same time, and usually only 2 or 3 of us would be working at once. However, Chris didn't really seem to be much of a talker. Neither was I for that matter, but I actually talked with him a couple of times, and he just gave really short responses. We worked together for probably 2 months or so, on and off. One night, I was working with somebody else, and Chris was not there. It was a fairly quiet night on the job, and everything went by normal. After I got off of work, I went back home to my apartment. My apartment was pretty close, like I said, and I lived alone in my place on the 2nd floor of the building. By the time I got back, it was maybe 9:30 or so. I did not have to be up early the next day, and I ended up staying up sort of late. So, at about midnight, I was still awake and in my living room. There was a sudden knock on the front door. It was a loud and firm knock, and it startled me. I sat up, and suddenly my heart was racing. Why would somebody knock on my door at midnight? I really wasn't expecting it. I got up and walked over, and in the process, heard another knock. When I arrived at my door, I looked through my peephole to the other side before answering. My coworker Chris was standing there. It was very strange to see him, because I knew that he didn't live in this building. I also never told him where I lived before. He was just standing there, facing my door and looking at it. I chose not to answer. It was just too weird. I kept watching though, and he stood there for maybe 5 minutes at least. Then, finally, he left and walked away, disappearing down the hallway. I was left wondering why on earth he had been there in the first place. I knew that I had never invited him over, or even told him my address. Well, the next day, I worked, and I just happened to work with Chris. Not too long into the shift, when things were sort of quiet, I asked him why he went to my apartment the previous night. Chris completely denied it. I said I literally saw him standing right outside of my door the previous night, but he said he wasn't there and had stayed home. He even went so far as to claim that either someone who looked like him was there or that I dreamed the whole thing. I knew that was a lie. I just kind of said whatever and then moved on with work. The rest of the shift went by as normal, and I didn't talk to him at all. After that, I never saw Chris at work again. I found out that he quit, but I didn't get a reason why. I found the timing of it very suspicious. I haven't seen him since then, and I still wonder what he was doing that night. I went to the Dollar Tree one time many years ago. It's basically a popular chain of dollar stores. They have food and lots of other basic household items, and everything there costs only $1. I was out shopping and had to go to another store as well. It was nighttime, and I arrived at the dollar store after having visited one other store to that point. I remember that I was shopping around and had picked up a few items. When I reached one of the back middle aisles, I noticed a strange person. There was a man standing on the far end of the aisle facing me and just staring at me. He didn't appear to be doing anything other than that. It just struck me as odd. I didn't recognize him and didn't know who he was. Maybe he thought that he recognized me, or maybe he just wanted to stare at me. I ignored him and then I kept shopping. I didn't stay there for much longer. Soon, I went to another aisle and then I checked out and left. For the rest of the time at the Dollar Tree, I don't recall seeing that man. So I had more shopping to do, and next I went to another store. This was a grocery store, and it was the last store that I was going to be going to for the day. This store was pretty large, and when I got there, I went inside and began shopping. After being inside of this grocery store for probably 15 or 20 minutes, I saw the same guy again. I entered an aisle in the grocery store, and he was standing at the end of it. It was a similar stance to what he had in the Dollar Tree. This was really surprising to me, but I figured it to just be a really strange coincidence. I actually left the aisle right after entering because it was so strange. Then I kept shopping. I went around the store and I didn't see the man, but I was just focused on the items that I was getting. I only shopped for probably another 5 minutes or so. Then I headed to the front of the store, checked out, and left. After that, I walked back to my car in the parking lot. I was parked sort of in the middle, but towards the back. After getting in my vehicle, I looked around and noticed something. There was a car parked across the way, and the same guy was in the driver's seat of it. This all just seemed too strange to me now. I got the feeling that maybe this guy was following me. I didn't know why, and I didn't know who he was. I sat there in my car for a few minutes, waiting to see if he would leave, but he didn't. He just kept sitting there. I didn't want to leave. I was afraid that he would follow me home, so instead, I just kept waiting. But the longer that I did, the longer the man did as well. After a while of this, I decided to go back inside of the store. I got out of my car and headed back in. I thought the man might follow me doing that. However, when I had almost made it in, I glanced back and did not see him following me or anything. So at that point, I walked around the store for a few minutes. Eventually, I decided to go back outside and check. I started walking to my car and I didn't see the guy. I soon made it all the way back to my car and then I got inside. When I did, I saw that the man's car was no longer there at all. He finally left. At that point, I drove back home. After that night, I never saw the man again. I still wonder why he was looking at me like that in the Dollar Tree, and why was he seemingly following me? I figured that he must have followed me from the Dollar Tree to the grocery store. The whole thing gives me the creeps.
This happened a couple of months ago when I was shopping at my local dollar store. I go there quite often and get all kinds of things, whatever I need really. I don't mind that the quality is cheap because I save lots of money shopping there. I wouldn't get just anything there though, but the things that I do work out just fine for me. The apartment that I live in happens to be a walking distance away from the dollar store. This also makes it very convenient for me. One late Saturday afternoon, I went to the dollar store to get just a few things. I walked the 10 minutes or so it took me to get from my apartment to the store. It's a smaller store and it's never usually that busy. I walked in on this afternoon to see just a couple of other people scattered throughout. I grabbed a basket and began shopping. I didn't make it very far though before something odd happened. When I made it to the back corner of the store, I saw a man standing there openly drinking a beer. The guy was dressed a little odd too. He didn't look homeless, but he was wearing a green sweater and sort of dress pants. He did not look clean or sharp, but also not that messy. I found this really odd and actually pretty funny. The guy was just standing there sipping out of a beer bottle. He wasn't shopping, but just standing there. I could see another bottle of beer that was open, hanging out of his pocket. I sort of laughed and smiled as I saw this. The guy wasn't looking at me though. Someone else walked past him, giving the man an odd look. I was shopping for some items nearby, but I got a little bit nosy and looked over every so often to see if the guy was still there. The dollar store did not sell beer, so I guess the guy must have brought it in with him. Soon after, I heard a store employee go over to him. I heard them telling the man he had to leave, and he was not supposed to be drinking in there. The man was not happy. There was a brief argument before he stormed off. He really didn't seem that drunk, but I guess he could have been. It was kind of unreasonable to walk into a store drinking a beer like that. Maybe he was pulling a prank or something. I finished up my shopping and went to check out. I got maybe 5 things, and the cashier put them all in a bag. After paying, I left and started to walk home. I made it about halfway back and was on the sidewalk when I saw the man up ahead, the guy who had been drinking in the store. He looked really angry now, and he was standing by a mailbox and drinking one of his beers. I noticed him staring at me as I walked closer. When I got about 10 feet away, the man's eyes had not left me. I smiled friendly to him and asked him how he was doing. The man kept his angry look and then cursed at me. I was really surprised. I decided to just walk past him and not say anything more. But as I was walking away, the man said, "Where do you think you're going?" I told the man that I was walking home, but as I did, I heard his footsteps approaching mine. I turned around and faced him. He looked even more angry. I told the man that I didn't want any trouble and I was just trying to get home. The guy started cursing at me again. I figured now that he must have been drunk. His speech wasn't slurred, but there was no other explanation for this erratic behavior. I turned to keep walking home, but the man then grabbed my shoulder and tugged me back. That's when I jerked away and started sprinting. The man began to chase after me, but he was not very fast. I ran all the way back home to my apartment and I got inside. Luckily, the man stopped chasing me just before my building. I had never felt unsafe before in my neighborhood, but after that, I have to be a little bit more careful. I'm not sure what that man's problem was, but I hope not to see him again.
My name is Amanda, and this happened a few years ago when I was younger. During that time, I lived with my 2 brothers, my sister, and my parents. We were hanging out one night, and between all of us, we would run out of things quickly. My siblings and I were hungry, and me, being one of the older siblings, and 17 at the time, offered to go to the store. Everyone else was busy doing their own thing, so I left the house and got inside my car. I was only planning on getting a few things and would not be gone for too long. The closest store to us was a Family Dollar that was probably less than 5 minutes away. I decided to go there because it was so close, and plus, the prices were really cheap. By this time, it was maybe 8 p.m. or so. I got to Family Dollar and I went inside. Once in the store, I saw a few other people shopping. I made my way to the snack aisle and started looking around. There were a few things that my siblings had specifically asked for. Like, for example, I know somebody wanted the TGI Fridays potato skins. I was looking around and having a difficult time finding them when a man approached me. He said, "Need help finding anything?" Just out of instincts, I said, "No thanks." I knew that what I was looking for was nearby and in this aisle. The guy then started walking away. I hadn't even looked at him, but as he left the aisle, I did. I realized that the man didn't even work there. He was just wearing a t-shirt and jeans. A little strange, but whatever. I went back to shopping. I found a few things and put them in the shopping basket that I had. Then I made my way to the next aisle over. I started out being the only person in that aisle, but soon the same man approached me again. This time, he walked about 5 feet away from me or less and just kind of stared in my direction. I kept looking at the items on the shelves until I could tell that he was staring at me. Then I looked over. The man was looking at my basket and he started saying the products that I had in it. Chips, trail mix, Coca-Cola. Fun night planned? I just kind of laughed and said I was just picking up some snacks. The man asked me if I lived around here. I said sort of. By the way, this guy was much older than me and gave me a sort of creepy feeling immediately. He asked me a couple of more questions, like what neighborhood I lived in and who I lived with. I found the questions to be odd, and I gave as basic responses as I could. The man asked me what else I was getting, and I said a couple of other things. I decided to walk out of that aisle because it seemed like the conversation had sort of ended. But the man then walked with me to the next aisle. It was really awkward, and I couldn't even think of what else I wanted to get anymore. I think I grabbed like 1 or 2 more things, and then just sort of walked around. The guy would not leave me alone. After awkward silence, he asked me if I needed a ride home or anything. I told him no, I drove myself there. The guy then asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. I told him no thanks. I headed to the checkouts then. I just wanted to get out of there and away from that creep. When I did, he started to follow me to the checkout. The uncomfortableness was unbelievable. Finally, I made it to the checkout area and the guy was still standing right next to me, as if we had gone there together.
He even offered to pay for my items, but I said no and I paid myself. After that, I started to leave, but I had a bad feeling like the guy was going to follow me home. I happened to notice that there were a few bathrooms nearby. I walked over to one, and the man kind of stopped when he realized I was going to use the restroom. When I got inside, I locked the door. I didn't have to use the bathroom, but I just wanted to get away from the guy. I stayed in there for a while. I didn't really have a plan, but I thought maybe if I was in there for a long time, he would leave. I just went on my phone in there and waited for like 15 minutes. When I came out, the man wasn't there anymore. I saw the woman working at the counter that I had checked out at. She looked sort of concerned. I went over to her and asked her if the guy was still there who had been standing near me. The woman said that he walked towards the back of the store. She said that he was just standing around the bathrooms, and she asked him if he needed help with anything. The guy then just said no and walked away. She asked if I knew him. I told her no, and I told her how he wouldn't leave me alone. She said she could kind of tell, and just as we were talking, the man started to come back into sight from the back of the store. He walked over to me and said, "Ready to go?" The employee asked the man if he even knew me, and he said yes. She then told him that she knew he was lying. The woman threatened to call the police right there if the guy didn't leave. And luckily, he actually did. After he was gone, I was able to drive back home and make it safely. And I'm happy to say I never saw that guy again.
My uncle used to own a local dollar store in town for many years. Because of this, I worked there on and off for years when I was in high school and college. I knew the store really well, and I would often work there alone. And this was the case one quiet night. I was working by myself until close. We closed at 9 p.m., and by 8 o'clock, the store was completely empty inside, aside from myself. Things were usually pretty quiet. It was a fairly small store, and as I sat behind my counter at the checkout, I noticed out the window 2 men walking through the small parking lot. They approached the store and then entered. The 2 men were wearing dark clothing and both wearing hats as well. After entering the store, they came right up to me at the register. Then they told me that they were there to inspect the place and had been sent by the city. Right away, it seemed really sketchy and I didn't believe it. If that was true, I would think that I would have gotten a heads up about it. Plus, I would also think that they would come during the day in normal business hours. The men also didn't look very professional. I told them that I wasn't expecting them and asked who exactly told them to come here. They just repeated that they were sent by the city and said something like they were there a day or 2 early, and that was their explanation as to why I was not given a heads up. I still wasn't buying it though. I told them that I was not going to let them do anything until I had confirmation. The men both then just kind of walked off but did not leave. They went in the direction of the back end of the store, and before long they were out of my sight. There wasn't really anything that I could do to kick them out of the store. I could ask them to leave, but I didn't really think they would listen. After they went out of my sight, I asked them where they were going, but I got no response. I was nervous about what was going on and what exactly these guys were doing. So I took out my phone and I called my uncle. Luckily, he answered right away, and I told him what was going on. My uncle said that it seemed really sketchy and the store was not due to have any kind of inspection. Then he suggested that I ask the men to leave, and if they don't, I could call the police on them and have them trespassed. So after getting off the phone with my uncle, I looked around from where I was and I did not see the guys at all. The store was now completely silent. There were a few aisles in the back that were completely out of my sight, and that's likely where they had gone. So after a few more minutes, I decided to go back there and ask them to leave. I left my register and then walked to the back end of the store. When I got there, I still saw no signs of the men at all. I looked around a little more. Soon though, I realized that the only place they could have gone is into the back room. That made me nervous. We had a pretty small back room in the dollar store. It was where we kept all the extra inventory and stuff. Back there, it was cluttered and a little sloppy and smaller than probably most stores' back rooms, but we made it work. The men were obviously not supposed to be back there though. Only employees were. The door to it was closed and clearly said employees only. I walked over to it and opened it up. When I did, I saw that it was very dark, but I didn't see or hear the men. I called out asking if they were back there. Nobody answered me though. I thought about walking further in, but I quickly thought better of it. I figured that the men were hiding. Instead, I left the back room and I headed back towards the front of the store. I got back to my register and then I called the police. I told them what happened, and they said that an officer would be there in a few minutes. After that, I just waited, and I hoped that I was not in any danger. During that time, I did not hear or see anything at all. Soon the police arrived. They went in the back room and searched for the men. However, nobody was there. The men had left. There was one exit door from the back room that led into an alleyway behind the building. They must have left through there. I went into the back room and looked around, and noticed that the men had stolen a few things. Some other things were also messed up back there, even more so than usual. I'm just grateful that I was okay. I'm really glad that I didn't go into the back room when the men were hiding back there, because I almost did.
Just a couple of weeks ago, I drove down to the dollar store that's only a few blocks away. I live in a neighborhood behind it, and occasionally I go there to get things. The store has cheap items, and sometimes it's a really good deal. I think I went there to get just a couple of things. I'm not sure what time the store closes, but it's usually open pretty late, even though not that many people go there. I got to the store and parked in the quiet parking lot. The store shares a parking lot with several other businesses attached to it. They are a pet supply store, a nail salon, and a pastry shop. Obviously, all of the other stores were closed. The parking lot was basically empty. There were just 3 other cars there in total. I parked and then walked inside the store. When I got inside, things were very quiet. I didn't really see anybody else inside for that matter. I made my way up and down the first few aisles looking for what I was planning to get. I spent about 5 minutes in the first 3 aisles of the store. It was at some point when I was in the 3rd aisle that I got the feeling I was being watched. I looked around to both ends of the aisle, and at first I saw nothing, but then realized that there was a man watching me. He stood halfway behind the aisle at the very end. He was looking at me with a straight face, but he was staring. This was really weird. I stared at him for a moment, giving him a somewhat dirty look. I was not amused by this. Then I turned and moved to the next aisle over. As I was in there, the man simply moved along to the next aisle. He kept a straight face and continued to once again stare at me as I shopped. This is something that I had never experienced before, and if this was this man's idea of a joke, it was not funny. I decided that I would not shop around anymore and would just get the things that I needed and leave. I left the aisle and walked several aisles down to get my final item. Once I was there, the man followed me again and repeated the same thing of staring at me. I decided to just ignore him. I spent a couple of more minutes inside, once going back to another aisle to get something that I had forgotten. Then I went to walk to the front of the store and check out. I had to walk past the man that was watching me, but he actually walked away before I reached him. I paid for my items, got my receipt, and then left the store. As I walked to my car, I thought about how strange that situation was inside. I was glad that it was now over. I reached my vehicle, put my items in the back seat, and then got inside. After I had started my engine, I looked in my rearview mirror to back up. I saw the man staring at me behind my car in the parking lot. He was facing me and just standing there. It was the same stare that he had given to me inside the store. The man was right in my way of backing up, and I wouldn't be able to leave until he moved. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I sat there, just staring at him in my mirror as he stared back at me. Looking back, I wish I would have got my phone out and taken a video, but that thought just didn't occur to me. I think I was just so shocked by it. Probably 2 or more minutes went by. The man was still standing there, blocking my way. I decided to honk my horn, but that didn't seem to do anything. I honked at the man again. Now he finally moved. The guy slowly took a step closer to the rear of my car. Once he had reached my car, he suddenly bolted around to the side. He was headed straight for my driver's door. I put my car into reverse and hit the gas. As the man reached my window, I quickly backed out of there and left. I did not wait around or stop to see what the man had wanted. I drove home, and I haven't seen the guy or been back to that dollar store since.
My name is Natalie, and this happened when I was in college. During my freshman year, I lived by myself in a dorm room in one of the freshman dorm buildings. They were kind of on the edge of campus, and within a walking distance away was this dollar store. Throughout the school year, this quickly became one of my main places to shop. Everything was $1, and I could get most of the things that I needed. School supplies like notebooks and pencils, snacks, and things like soap and toothpaste. Those were the main things that I would get on a regular basis. I
Probably went there about 2 times a week on average. I also didn't have much money being a college student. Over a few months of being in school, I went to the dollar store so much that I would recognize several of the employees. So one night, it was just like any other. I was in my dorm room. It was pretty late, and I was at my desk trying to finish a homework assignment on my laptop. Things were silent. My TV was on, but the volume was super low. I thought I heard like a click noise coming from the door area. I wasn't quite sure what exactly it was, and then I heard it again. This caused me to get up and walk over to the door area. I looked around inside my room, and nothing seemed out of place. I really wasn't sure what could have caused it. I casually looked out of the peephole into the hallway. There, I saw a guy standing right outside my door on the other side. At first, I didn't recognize him, but when I saw his face, I did. It took me a few seconds to place him. I then realized that he worked at the dollar store that I shopped at. He was just standing there. Then, he tried opening up the door. I was sort of creeped out by this. I wasn't sure if he knew that I was now on the other side of the door or not. I backed away from it. Just then, he knocked a few times. I was too creeped out to answer. I tried to be as quiet as I could so that he didn't hear me. I waited maybe 5 minutes and then looked out again. He was still there. I stood next to the door waiting. Finally, I heard another door down the hallway opening, and I looked back out. I saw the man walking away. After that, I stopped going to that dollar store. The good news is I never saw the man again either. I'm really glad my door was locked that night and he didn't get in.
Something really scary happened to me just a few months ago. So this was nighttime and probably 9-something p.m. I remembered a few things that I needed to get at the store. The closest store to me was a Family Dollar, so I decided to just go there. I got into my car, drove there, and then parked and went inside. By now, at this time of night, things were pretty quiet. After going inside, I was easily able to go around the store and find all the things that I needed. I would say that I was inside shopping for maybe 10 minutes, if that. Then I went to the front of the store, checked out, and left. However, this is where the story really starts. After walking out of the store and into the parking lot, I noticed something strange. A car was parked directly next to mine, so I could barely see my own car. There were closer spaces available, so it seemed kind of strange. As I walked closer and approached my car, I could see that the car next to mine was still running. Eventually, I reached the first car. That's when I heard the door open up. I became a little defensive and suspicious of things because of the timing. Still, I kept going around to my car. However, whoever had just left the vehicle next to mine also went around towards my driver's side. So when I reached my driver's door, I saw a man already standing there. This man faced me and then told me that he needed my car keys. I had a terrible feeling about it. It seemed as though he was trying to steal my car. For a moment, I didn't do anything. I wasn't sure if this guy had some kind of weapon or not, although his hands were not in his pockets or anything, and they appeared to be empty. I asked the guy why he needed my keys. He told me to just give them to him. At that point, it was just a reaction for me, and I turned around and started running. Looking back, this was a dangerous thing to do and I probably shouldn't have, but I ran back towards the dollar store but did not go inside. Instead, I ran to the side of the store and then went behind it. When I was running though, I heard the man was also running after me. There was a neighborhood behind the dollar store, and I started running down the street. I soon ran through somebody's yard and then into their backyard. I had gotten a pretty good head start on the man. I ran through several backyards just desperately trying to get away. At some point, I don't know exactly when, I lost the man. The next thing I knew, I slowed down and I didn't see or hear him. I stood just off the street and went behind a large bush and tree just inside someone's yard. I was about to head back to my car, but then realized that I might see the guy again. So instead, I took out my phone and I dialed 911. I told the 911 dispatcher what had happened. Then I waited there and did not go back out into the street until the police arrived. Then I finally went back to the dollar store. The man must have gone back because him and his car were gone. I was glad to not have to deal with him anymore. After talking with the police for a while, I went home. I haven't been back to that dollar store since. This is the story of the only time that I've ever went to Dollar Tree. It was years ago now. Up to that point, I just never really lived close to one, and when I was younger, my parents never went there or anything. So when I got older, it was never part of my routine to go to Dollar Tree. I was always kind of curious about it though. Finally, one time, there was one not far away from the apartment that I lived in at the time. I needed to get a few things, and instead of going to my normal store, I decided to go to the Dollar Tree. I wanted to see for myself how the quality of the products were and also how much money I would save by going there. So I drove from my apartment to the local Dollar Tree, which was less than 10 minutes from my place. I arrived at night and parked in the quiet parking lot. It was not super late, but definitely after the afternoon and evening rush. So I got inside the store and it was very quiet there as well. I didn't really see any other people around the store shopping. I got a basket and started going around the store seeing what they had. Overall, there was a good selection, but not a lot of the usual brands that I would get. In the midst of looking around though, I was in the store for maybe 5 minutes before something weird happened. I was in an aisle looking at stuff, and this woman entered the aisle as well. I did not look at her, but it was like I could feel that she was looking at me. But I didn't look over at her still, and I just kept looking at the products. When I was done in that aisle, I moved to the next one, and when I did that, I finally looked over. I saw the woman, and she appeared to be looking at me still. So I went to the other aisle and continued shopping, where the woman soon joined me. She didn't get that close to me, but kept a distance. The woman was sort of short, appeared to be around 40 or so, and had dark hair with a lot of volume. So I just ignored her really, but it seemed like everywhere that I went, she would trail behind me a little ways. I didn't know why this was, but I didn't really want to confront her. So instead, I just ignored her really. After a long time of this though, it was getting annoying. Soon enough, I was done shopping and I went to check out and leave. I was wondering if the woman would continue to seemingly follow me. But when I got to the checkouts, I couldn't see her anymore. So I paid for all my stuff and then I left. I went to my car in the parking lot and put my things inside, and then I got in the car. Right as I started my engine, I saw another car that was in the parking lot driving. I wasn't sure where this car had been, if it was arriving at the Dollar Tree or leaving, because I hadn't been paying attention. But it was approaching my car, so I waited to back out until it passed. However, the car turned, and now it was driving straight for me. The next thing I knew, this car drove right into the back of my car, rear-ending me. It really wasn't that bad of a crash, and I wasn't injured or anything, but it was extremely surprising. Then the car that hit me started to back up. When this was happening, I saw the driver. It was the same woman who had been following me around inside the store. That really shocked me. What was this lady's problem? After crashing into my car and then backing up, she quickly drove off. I stayed and called the police. I didn't have the lady's license plate, obviously. When the cops got there, I could only tell them what I knew. My car was damaged pretty good in the back. Thankfully, insurance covered it. But it was found out later that the woman had been driving without a license and the car wasn't even hers. But that doesn't explain her strange behavior. My best guess is drugs. This took place about 3 weeks back. It was the morning time, and my girlfriend Alyssa and I were going on a day trip about 2 hours away. But shortly after we left, maybe 5 minutes into the drive, Alyssa remembered something and asked me to stop. There was a Dollar Tree right off the road coming up, so I pulled off. We were in an area with quite a few stores, but I felt like the Dollar Tree would be the fastest in and out. So I pulled into the parking lot and parked right in front of the building. Alyssa said that she would just run inside really quick and would be right back. So I stayed inside of the car and kept it running while she went in. I was guessing that she would be out within 2 or 3 minutes, seeing as that she only had to get one thing. So I sat there and just looked around the parking lot. It was a beautiful sunny day, and things seemed pretty calm. However, within probably 30 seconds, I noticed the automatic doors of the Dollar Tree opening. A man walked out, who was wearing a backwards baseball hat, and he started walking on the sidewalk out front of the store. He put a cigarette into his mouth, and then he looked over at me as he passed by my car. But instead of continuing to walk down the sidewalk, the man stopped and then headed over towards me. I had a bad feeling when I saw this. I really didn't know what this man could possibly want. He went right up to my driver's window, and I rolled it down about halfway. The man asked me if I had some money for him, or if I would give him a ride. I told the guy no, I was in a hurry. The man did not respond, but then tried opening my driver's door. Luckily, it was locked. Now, I wasn't quite sure what to do. I rolled my window back up, but I couldn't drive away because Alyssa was still inside. I was hoping that she would come out soon. The man stayed by my driver's door and started knocking on the window almost as soon as I had closed it. I told the man to go away, but he did not. The guy started getting a little bit aggressive, calling me names and telling me to come out of the car. I tried to just ignore it. Then the man took a punch at my window. Luckily, it didn't break or anything. It was just after this that I saw the doors open to the Dollar Tree out of the corner of my eye. I looked over and Alyssa was walking out. She began walking to my car, but I saw the man finally leave my car only to start approaching her. I didn't know what he was planning to do, if he was going to try to ask her for money as well or what, but I didn't want him going near her. I opened up my driver's door and left the car. I shouted to the man to come back, and I may have called him a name as well. He stopped approaching Alyssa, who was about halfway to the car, and now probably very confused. He turned around and started walking back over to me. The man looked angry, but at the same time, almost happy. It was like he was looking forward to fighting me, and as he approached, I told Alyssa to get in the car. I sprinted back around to my driver's door and got inside while the man chased after me. Alyssa sprinted to the passenger side door and was able to get inside easily. After we both made it in, we locked our doors, and the man was now directly in front of my car, about to reach my driver's door. I was able to lock it just in time, and after the man tried the door, he started to repeatedly punch at my window. I quickly put the car into reverse, backed away, and then left the parking lot. The man tried chasing after us on foot, but obviously we were able to outrun him easily. Alyssa asked me what on earth that was all about. I told her the story, and then she called the police, reporting the whole incident. We were told that an officer would go to the Dollar Tree and look for the man. Then we went on with our drive. Looking back at that moment, we came extremely close to the man possibly trying to attack one of us. I feel very lucky to have escaped. Sure, maybe I could have taken him in a fight. That's just not a situation that I wanted to be in. Hopefully that man didn't bother anybody else. I worked at a dollar store for a while. This was years ago now. Sometimes shady characters would come in from time to time. I was never too worried though, because nothing ever really happened. But one time I was working by myself one evening. The dollar store would be closing soon as it was approaching 10 p.m. I was the only one working and by myself. Typically this time of night was very quiet, and we hadn't had any customers come in a while. I had checked out a customer maybe 10 minutes prior, and nobody else had entered the store since. So I was all by myself up at the checkouts. I was just on my phone, bored, and waiting to get off of work. But it wasn't too bad, the fact that I could just sit there and play games on my phone and stuff. I was completely fine with nobody else being there. It was very quiet inside the store for a while, only the small sound of the low volume from the game that I was playing on my phone. Then, out of nowhere, I suddenly heard a sound. It was coming from somewhere in the store. It sounded like something had fallen off a shelf. The way that it broke the silence kind of spooked me, and I felt a little nervous. I looked in the direction but couldn't see anything. Our dollar store was about an average size for one, so the store wasn't that big. However, I could only see a few aisles, and there were many places that were out of my sight. After looking in the direction for a little while, I still couldn't see anything. I didn't hear anything else now either, so I stayed where I was. I chalked it up to maybe just an item that was placed too close to the edge of a shelf or something. I continued with my game, but I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous now. Then it happened again. I heard another item fall off a shelf seemingly. This time I knew something was up. I looked over, but this was out of my sight as well, so I got up and decided to investigate. I was pretty nervous, but I made my way over towards where I had heard the noise. As I quietly walked, I didn't hear anything else at all. I got closer, and soon I saw what fell. There were two products in the same aisle that had fallen down. Nobody else appeared to be inside of the store. I looked at where the items had fallen from, and I had no idea how they could have fallen on their own. So I put them back, and then I started to walk around the store. As I was doing so, I heard another noise. Something fell from a shelf on the other end of the store way out of my sight. Now I was super creeped out. I called out, asking if anybody was in the store. There was no answer. I slowly walked over to where this next noise had come from. When I got to that aisle, I saw something else on the ground. I didn't see anybody though still. I looked around and then called out again, asking if anybody was there. Still nothing. Now I was in the far back corner of the store, and at that point I suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. It was not very loud, and I could only barely hear it, but it sounded like somebody running. They were making their way up towards the front of the store. I started walking over there. By the time I got within view of the front, I actually saw somebody. There was a man up at the check lanes, specifically the one that I had been at. I really couldn't believe it. I had no idea that anybody else had been in the store. The man was trying to get into the cash register at my check lane that I had been working at. Thankfully, I had locked the cash register because I hadn't used it in a while. It was a habit for me to not leave it unlocked. The man saw me come into his view. He continued trying to open it and then tried picking it up and then started banging on it. He looked over at me and I kept my distance but yelled at him to stop. The man didn't say anything. Then he jumped up and moved to another register. That one was also locked. They all were. I yelled that I was calling the police and then I got out my phone. The man messed around with that one for a while and then he got up and ran away. He left the store running off into the night. I quickly went over to the doors and then locked them. We were closing early now and I didn't care if anybody else showed up. Then I waited for the police. When they got there, I spoke with them, giving my account of what happened and so forth. They said that they would go look for the man. After that though, I don't think he was ever located. He didn't come back to that store though, I know that. He must have been really good at keeping quiet, because I had no clue that anybody had been inside the store. I'm not sure when the man got there or how he stayed out of my sight for so long. That was the scariest experience from working at the dollar store though.
I used to work at a Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree is a popular dollar store, and I worked there for about 6 months several years ago. I worked as a cashier, and after being there for only a few months, I would occasionally work by myself. We were always trying to hire more people, but luckily, every time I would be the only one working, it was never that bad. I worked mostly night shifts, usually until close. We closed at 10 p.m., and the store was in a sort of quiet area. One quiet night, I was working by myself. It was slightly rainy outside, and it would sprinkle on and off. I was noticing this because in the front of the store, ahead of the check lanes, there were windows looking out into the parking lot. After 8 p.m. that night, we hardly got any customers. The rain must have kept people in. I kept myself busy by doing small tasks, organizing things, and going on my phone. The last hour would always drag out, but it was also nice to know that I would be going home soon. And on this night, after 9 p.m., we didn't have a single customer. This was fine with me. I always felt a little bit nervous being the lone employee on the clock when somebody came in late at night. But at about 9:15 or so, I saw a car pull into the wet parking lot. Up to that point, my car had been the only one there. This car that pulled in was older and it was dark blue. It was a 4-door sedan, and it parked in the closest parking space, and then I saw a man get out. He was a little bit of a bigger guy, and he wore a blue raincoat and a gray and red baseball cap. He left his car and approached the store. After going inside, he walked down one of the aisles. I stayed by the register at my check lane and went on my phone. A few minutes later, I observed the man walking through the aisles towards the front of the store. He seemed to be just kind of casually looking around. He didn't have any items in hand, and he soon walked back out of my sight. Then he slowly walked towards the front. I looked over and made eye contact with the man for a brief moment. To be friendly, I smiled a little and said hi. The man just looked away and then slowly walked for the exit. Then he left the store. I watched the man get back inside of his car and then drive away. I was back to being by myself again. By now, it was about 9:30. I walked around the store and made sure that everything was in order. Then I decided to clean the floors now so I could leave right at 10. Luckily for me, nobody came to shop as I did so. This took me until about 9:50. Then I went back to my check lane and went on my phone for the remaining 10 minutes. I was checking the time on my phone every minute so that I could close right at 10 and then clock out. At 9:58 p.m., I saw a car pulling into the parking lot. I had a bad feeling. But then I noticed something. It was the same car that had just been here. There was no mistaking it, because this was an older looking car and kind of unusual. The man who had just been here about 30 minutes ago was back, but he did not park close to the store this time. Now he went and parked right next to my vehicle. I had parked somewhat far away and up against a curb. The man parked on the side of the car closer to me, so my car was mostly obstructed from my vision by his car. I thought this was a little bit strange. I figured maybe the man had dropped something on the ground when he was in the store and he came back to get it. I'm not sure why, but that's the possible explanation that went through my head. The man did not get out of his car though. I had expected him to. Instead, he stayed inside of his car with the engine running. At 10 p.m., his engine turned off. It was now time for me to lock the doors, and I walked over to them, all the while keeping my eyes on the car in the parking lot. I wondered if he would get out when I approached the doors or something like that. I was a little worried for some reason, but he didn't. I made it to the front doors and successfully locked them. Then I walked to the back area to clock out of my shift. After doing so, I returned to the front, hoping and sort of expecting to see that the man was now gone. After all, he could clearly see that we were now closed, and I had just locked up. But the car was still there. It appeared as though the man was still inside of it. Now I had a really bad feeling. Why did he choose to park right next to me? There were a dozen closer spaces, and why was he even here at all? I thought about just walking out, going to my car, and leaving, but my instincts just told me not to. What if the man was waiting for me? I decided to wait inside and hope that the man would leave. I sat inside at my check lane, going on my phone and looking up every minute or so to see if the guy was gone yet. But he wasn't leaving, and soon 30 minutes had passed. It was now 10:30 at night, and the man was still parked right next to my car in his. I decided that I would text my best friend Brenna, who happened to live pretty close by. After telling her of the situation, she offered to come and pick me up in her car, and I agreed. I told her to drive right up to the front doors. My car and the man were much further away in the backside of the parking lot. She told me that she was leaving, and about 5 minutes later, I saw her car enter the parking lot. I walked over to the front of the store and then walked out. Right as she pulled up, she stopped briefly, let me in the passenger seat, then she quickly drove away. We left, and thankfully the man did not follow us in his car. We drove back to Brenna's house, and then returned to the Dollar Tree a short time later. The man's car was now gone. Brenna dropped me off, and I was able to get inside my vehicle okay, and then drive home. After that experience, I really wondered what the man was doing. Was he waiting for me to get to my car, and did he have something planned? I'm glad I didn't have to find out.
To start out, this story takes place a few years ago. I'm a female and was still a minor at the time, and looked it. I went to the Dollar Tree with my great aunt. When we were there, she told me that I could go around the store and pick out 5 items and she would buy them for me. I started by looking at the stuffed animals because I really wanted to get one for my cat to play with. As I was looking through them, I noticed a man, a bit older than me, at least mid-20s, looking at me. He was probably about 10 feet away. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, so I continued to find a stuffed animal for my cat. I finally found a small blue teddy bear that would be perfect for her. I looked at a couple of more things in the toy aisle, and as I was around there, I turned to see the man again. He noticed that I saw him, and he grabbed the nearest item to him and pretended to look at it. It was pretty odd, but I didn't want to act as if I was alarmed, so I just went to a different aisle. I can't remember which one it was exactly, probably one of the snack aisles, but I once again saw the man, who was still kind of keeping his distance. I was browsing around, but I had the idea to test if he actually was following me or not. So I went down the feminine hygiene aisle, and sure enough, the man followed me down there, all while he was trying to keep his distance. Don't panic, I was saying to myself. I should have went and found my aunt again right then and there, but being the dumb kid that I was, I just looked around the store for more things. After probably about 5 or 10 minutes, all while he was still following me but keeping a distance, I saw my aunt again and showed her the 5 items that I picked out. I think it was some stickers, a pair of socks, and some candy, and the teddy bear for my cat. The man finally stopped following me after I was back shopping with my aunt. Looking back at that now, I could have easily been kidnapped or something due to not finding my aunt immediately, as the store wasn't very crowded, so there was nobody around to see. Thankfully, him following me was all that happened, and it could have been so much worse than it was. This has still been the scariest thing to ever happen to me.
A couple of weeks ago, I was shopping at the Dollar Tree. It was later at night, maybe 30 minutes or so before they closed. The store was very quiet. However, when I got sort of near the back corner, I did notice that another woman was there. She was just standing in the very far corner of the store and staring at me. But not just looking at me, but sort of glaring, like she was angry. It was very strange. When I first saw her, my thought was that it was strange, but I was also confused. Overall, I just looked away and kept shopping. I went to another area, but had to go back past the woman. When I did, she was still there and still staring at me the same way. It was so creepy. I made sure not to go near that part of the store again. I finished my shopping and was inside the store for maybe 10 more minutes. I didn't see the woman at all for the rest of the time that I was in there. Then I checked out and left. After walking out, I was going to my car in the parking lot. It was very quiet and dark out there. When I made it almost to my car, I saw the woman standing there next to another car about 50 feet behind mine. She was staring at me just like before. It was one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. I quickly got inside of my car and locked the door. The woman just kept standing there. Then I left, and she didn't follow me or anything. Still, I was really weirded out by the whole deal. I made it home just fine, but 2 nights later, I found myself going to that same dollar store again. It was just so close to my place and convenient to shop at. Plus, it was really cheap, obviously, with it being a dollar store. So anyways, it was also nighttime, and a little bit later on this occasion as well. I walked inside of the store and started shopping, but then I noticed that the same woman was there again, and she was standing in the same corner where she had been before. When I started to see her, she started to look at me. As soon as I saw that, I just turned around and walked away. I left the store right then and there. Since then, I haven't been back to that dollar store. This is my crazy experience from when I went shopping at Family Dollar one time. I would go there occasionally. It has pretty cheap prices on groceries and things like that. So I went there one day, got a cart, and then started shopping inside. It wasn't too busy. There were a few people here and there, but not that many. I was getting mainly groceries, but a few other items as well. As I made my way around the store, things were going good. Soon I reached the far back of the store. At this Family Dollar, the far back was where the refrigerated and freezer items were. So I was looking through the food there, and I spent a couple of minutes in that area. As I was doing this, I ventured a few feet away from my shopping cart to get something. That's when I noticed something really strange. I saw a man was on top of one of the freezers. These things are like 7 or 8 feet tall, but there's a gap between the top of them and the ceiling. The man had been lying down on top of one of them, almost completely hidden from anybody's view. I had no idea why he had been up there. He wasn't a worker or anything. Was he hiding from someone, or just being weird? After getting up, he stood on top of the freezer and looked around. I couldn't help but stop and watch him. He looked at me, and I asked him what he was doing up there. The man said something, but I couldn't understand him. He had a sort of dirty and disheveled look. Some other people nearby started to notice the man. We stood and watched him now walking across the tops of the freezers in the back of the store. After he made it about even with my shopping cart, he stood there, and then he suddenly jumped down. He jumped directly into my cart. He was too big to land in it though, so the cart tipped over and fell to the ground. It also caused a bunch of my items to fall out of the cart as well. It made a loud noise, and if anybody else wasn't already looking at the man or in this direction, they were now. I was at a loss for words and just stood there in disbelief at what I was witnessing. The man was not hurt despite taking quite a fall. He got up right to his feet and then started jogging away to the front of the store. He went out of my sight, and I didn't know if he was going to leave or what, but I was just glad that he had gotten away from me. I went over to my cart and picked it up, and then I started picking up my items. Some of the nearby shoppers made some comments about what had just happened. After picking my cart back up, I continued on. In doing so, I heard some shouting from the front of the store. The employees were trying to make the guy leave, it seemed. I was really curious at that point, so I couldn't help but make my way a little closer to the front to see what was going on. There were 3 employees near the guy. They were practically begging him to leave the store. The man finally turned and jogged off out of the doors. I watched him go to a car and then get inside and then drive off very quickly. When he was finally gone, I think that everybody in the store let out a sigh of relief. The guy seemed like a loose cannon. I was able to finish up my shopping at that point. I spent maybe another 5 minutes getting things and then went up to the front and checked out. After that, I left the Family Dollar. As I was driving home, something crazy happened though. I first stopped off to get gas, and then I made a quick stop at another store. Then I was actually going back to my house. I noticed up ahead on the road several police cars. There was an officer standing there waving me to the side of the road. I saw another one up ahead holding the spike strip things that the cops use to stop cars. I pulled over and then I heard sirens behind me as well. I looked back and saw lights. Then I saw a car come zooming up behind me on the road. It was the same car that the guy had gone into. This must be him. He was speeding, going way too fast. He went right past me, and then the cop tossed the spikes, which the man tried to avoid but ran over. And in trying to avoid them, he also lost control of his car and spun out. At least 5 police cars then cornered him in. I watched the man get out, and it was the same guy from the Family Dollar. The police arrested him, and I was able to go home. It was really crazy how I saw the guy again. He must have left Family Dollar only to lead the police on a crazy chase. That was a very memorable trip to the dollar store.
This happened about a year ago when I went to the dollar store. I was shopping for some basic items that I could get for cheap. There are some really good deals at dollar stores. It was later at night and the store was going to be closing soon. I knew that I would have to hurry up and check out before it was too late. I was walking around the store with a basket and had most of the items that I needed. I was just going to go down 1 or 2 more aisles. The store was very quiet. I had seen another customer when I first got there, but for the last 15 minutes or so, I hadn't seen anybody else other than an employee. As I walked down an aisle and was looking for toothpaste, I saw a box move. There was a pillar from the floor to the ceiling next to a shelf. Up against that pillar and a shelf was a larger cardboard box. When I saw the box move, I looked closer. I leaned in and then looked behind the box. There was some guy laying on the bottom shelf, mostly obstructed by the box and other items. I jumped back when I saw it because I was really surprised. The guy wasn't facing me, but he had to know that I had spotted him. Still, I didn't bother asking what he was doing down there. Instead, I just kept walking. I got my final items and then went up to the register. As I was checking out, I told the employee about the man hiding under the aisle. The employee asked me to show her. I walked back to the aisle and pointed to where the man was. I wasn't sure how the employee wanted to handle this situation. She walked over and had to move the box to see him because he was pretty well hidden. She then asked the guy if he was all right. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, he slowly got up from his hiding place and stood up. He didn't say a word, but walked past us both and then left the store. We were both a little bit weirded out by this and didn't know what the man was doing. Maybe he was homeless and looking for a place to stay, or maybe he was going to steal things. Either way, he was gone now, and the store would be closing any minute. I got my items and left. I walked out to my car in the parking lot after that. I put my items in the back and then got inside. Right as I was starting my engine, there was suddenly a knock at my driver's window. I looked to see the guy who had been hiding in the store. He was standing right there. He was knocking rather hard on my window as well, so I rolled it down. I'm not really sure why I did. Maybe it was just out of instincts, but I wish that I hadn't. As soon as my window got about halfway down, the man suddenly reached inside and tried to grab me. He then tried opening my door, which luckily was locked. Then, he started basically trying to jump inside of the vehicle. The only thing that I could think to do was to put my car into reverse and get out of there. As I drove away, the man was forced to let go and leave my car. I left him standing in the parking lot. That was a really scary experience for me. Something had to be wrong with that guy for him to act that way, because he really seemed crazy.
I worked at a Dollar Tree for a while, years back. I think I worked there for about 6 months. For this story, I'm just going to say that my name is Jennifer, even though it really isn't. When I worked at Dollar Tree, I was mostly a cashier. One night, this creepy guy came into the store. I'd been working there for a few months to that point, and sometimes I had to close the store by myself. The store didn't typically get that busy, especially later at night, so I was working by myself this time. The reason I say the guy who came in was creepy is because that's the feeling I got right away. He walked in and sort of looked around with these weird eyes. He went into the store and shopped around for a bit, and I stopped paying attention to him. Then he eventually got to the checkout. I remember that he only got a couple of things, I think some energy drinks and something else. When I was scanning his items, he asked me out. It wasn't a very polite or gentleman way to do so either. I was not interested, not even slightly. But I still wasn't going to be rude because I was working at my job, and I was also by myself with this creep at night. The last thing I wanted to do was tick him off, so I tried to politely decline his advances. He kept persisting though, and I made it clear to him that I wasn't going to change my mind. He asked me when I got off of work and when we closed and that sort of stuff. Even after he had paid and I gave him his receipt and stuff, he still wasn't leaving. Finally, after I still said no, he walked off. At this point, we may be closed in a little over an hour. I continued working. A few other customers came in here and there. We never really got that busy though. It was pretty easy work for the most part, but then the man came back inside the store again, the same creepy guy who had asked me out before. This gave me a pretty bad feeling because obviously I did not want to see this guy, and he had just been in here, so what could he possibly want now? The man walked in, and instead of shopping or anything like that, he walked directly up to me. He acted like me telling him off had never happened. The guy asked if I was off of work yet, and I said no. Then he said that he would be waiting for me, which really creeped me out. Now, in this moment, there were 2 other customers inside the store, and I knew that. So I got a little brave, feeling like the man wouldn't try anything stupid, or if he did, there were other people who could possibly help me. I told the guy not to wait for me. I said, "I'm not interested in you, pal. I don't want to go out with you, and I'm just trying to finish my shift, so leave me alone now." The man then said that he was going to find out more about me. Then he walked away and left. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I was glad that he was gone and I had made my message clear. For a few days, I didn't see him. Then, another night when I was at work, he came back. This time, he walked into the store again pretty late and came right up to me. When he did, he said, "Hello, Jennifer," and said my last name too. We did have name tags at the Dollar Tree, but I hadn't been wearing mine the last time I saw him, or this time either. I had lost mine a while back, and I had always forgot to wear it when I had it anyways. The manager of our store didn't seem to care too much if we wore them or not, so I didn't know how this guy knew my name. I asked him to leave again, and surprisingly he did. He just turned around and walked out with this creepy grin on his face. I had been prepared for him to give me a hard time. For the rest of that night, he didn't return. Later that night, I got off of work and drove back to my place. I lived in this little townhouse that wasn't very nice. About an hour after getting back from work, there was a knock on my door. I went over to the window and looked out. I obviously wasn't going to answer right away with it being nearly midnight. I saw the same guy there. Now he knew where I lived. I was so creeped out that I called the cops right then and there. The man didn't leave though. He tried opening the door. The first door opened, which was the screen door, but the other one was locked. He knocked on that door again and waited. Then I heard him saying, "Jennifer, I know you're home." It was so creepy. I just stayed inside waiting for the cops. The entire 10 minutes that it took them to get there, the man stayed right there on the step. Then when the police got there, they made him leave. He didn't do anything they could arrest him for apparently, but he was harassing me. He left after they told him to, so that was that. But I was sure to tell them about my job, and we were able to get him trespassed from the Dollar Tree. So if he ever did come back, he would be arrested. Thankfully, he never did. For a little bit of background, I will mention that I'm a female, and this took place last year. I was shopping at a dollar store called Dollar Tree. I don't go to Dollar Trees very often, but on this night, I did. It was probably around 7:30 p.m. or so. And when I got inside, the store was very quiet. I only saw a couple of other shoppers, and maybe one employee around the store. I shopped around and got a few things, and then went to the front to check out. Working at the check lane was a man that had dark hair that was somewhat short. The man was also kind of short, and when he scanned my items, he was making comments on all of them. He was saying stuff like, "What's this for?" Overall, it was slightly annoying, but not a huge deal. After checking out, I remembered that the guy said, "Well, now I'm off," and he turned off the light to his check lane. I was just like, "Oh, that's cool," and I started to leave. But the guy kept walking with me as I was leaving. He asked me where I was going after this, and I just said home. Then he started talking to me and walking with me as we left the store. It was really weird and something that I was not expecting at all. As we were walking through the parking lot, the man asked me to go with him. I asked him what he meant, and he was like, "What did I just say? Do you want to go with me? My car's right there." I said no thanks, but he continued to walk with me. When I got to my car, he was still there, and I said that I better be going. Then I unlocked my car door and started to open it. The very instant that I did, though, the man grabbed the door, forcing it open some more. Then he appeared to try to force his way inside. I knew that there was no chance I would be able to get in and drive away from him or anything, so I just turned and ran away from there. I still had the keys in my hand, luckily, so he wouldn't be able to steal my car or anything. The man started chasing after me, but I had a good 10-foot head start on him at least. The dollar store was part of a larger strip mall, which had at least 5 other stores in it. I sprinted up towards one of the other ones. When I was about halfway there, I could tell that the man was running behind me, but I didn't look. I made it to a Target department store, which was on the end of the strip mall. When I made it there, the man was no longer following me. I went inside of the store and called the police when I was safely inside. Then I waited for them to get there. It took about 5 minutes. When the police were there, I went back out to my car with them, but the man was gone. He had left, and I told the police the whole story. Fortunately, they went inside the dollar store and spoke with the other employee who was still working there. They knew who the man was, and the police were able to locate him pretty soon after. I was really glad that they found him. That man was such a creep, and I feel very lucky to have gotten away from him.
I'm a female, and I used to work at a dollar store when I was a bit younger. At the time, I was mostly working on weekends and some weeknights. The store was called Dollar Tree and would be pretty busy from time to time. I was working as a cashier one very busy Saturday. The store was really crowded, and I was getting a constant line of people in my check lane. We only had 4 check lanes total in the store. My shift was going by sort of fast with me being so constantly busy. I remember that at one point, a man came through my line and started talking with me. He was friendly at first, but it soon became pretty clear that he was trying to flirt with me, but I wasn't interested. He asked me when I got off and to hang out with him afterwards. When I told the man no thanks, he continued to try to convince me. This caused the already long line of people behind him to start to back up. I told the man that he needed to move along and keep things going. Finally, he said, "All right," and moved on. I was glad to see him leave, because he came across to me as a creep. I kept working, ringing up customer after customer. Hours later, things finally calmed down. It was nice that I could relax a little more now, but the time also seemed to go by slower. It was probably about 8 p.m. now. That's when I saw the guy enter the store once again, but he walked straight towards me at my register. He didn't even bother to buy anything or even look for anything. When he reached me, he immediately tried convincing me to go out with him again. I made it clear to him once more that I was not interested. We were both going back and forth then. Eventually, the man started to raise his voice. One of my coworkers, who was my boss, noticed, and she came over to see what was going on. Then, the man walked away and left before she could reach us. I told my boss of the situation. I wasn't bothered anymore because the guy was finally gone, but I was concerned that he would come back again. My boss told me that if he did, she would ban him from the store. The next time I worked was 3 nights later. I was working a shorter, later shift, and about 3 hours into it, the guy returned. We were not very busy, and once more, he went through the doors and straight to me. This time, though, he didn't bother trying to be friendly with me or convincing me. He was speaking in a much more threatening tone. The man told me that he knew where I lived and had followed me home. He said that he could go to my house whenever he wanted. My boss then noticed that the man was here again, and she came over to interfere. She threatened to call the police immediately, and the man walked out again. She made it clear to him as he left, though, that if he did come back, the police would be called. After I told my boss what he had told me, she called the police anyways. They came to the store, and we gave our sides of the story. From that point on, I never saw the man again. I wonder sometimes, though, if he really had followed me home. I hadn't noticed, but I guess it was possible. I also worried that he would show up at my house sometime, but to my knowledge, he never did.
This is something that happened not too long ago. I live alone in an apartment building. I live not that far away from this dollar store that's down the street. One nice afternoon, I walked there because it only takes like 10 minutes. I was just getting a couple of things, and after arriving, I shopped around like normal. There were a few other people there, but I didn't pay any attention to them. I went around, got what I needed, and then paid for it. After leaving the store, I was going to walk back. Overall, things were pretty calm and quiet around the neighborhood. I started walking on the sidewalk to go back home. But when I just passed the dollar store, I heard this car leaving, I think the dollar store parking lot. It turned, and it seemed like it was going to drive past me. However, it did not. Instead, it got really slow and then started driving even with me. I looked over and didn't recognize the car or the driver. Some guy was driving, and then he rolled down the window. Then he told me to get into his car. He did not seem friendly, but it was more like an angry command. Obviously, I was not going to do that. I asked who he was, and I walked faster. The guy kept up with me and kept insisting that I get into his car for some reason, but he didn't say who he was or anything. So at the next street, I took a left, even though I wasn't supposed to. The car took a left to keep up with me. I knew that he was just going to keep following me around at that point, so then I ran down the sidewalk and found an alleyway and then went down that. The car was not able to maneuver over there nearly as fast as me, so I ran down the alleyway, and then I did what I could to get away from the guy. I thought that I had lost him, but really I hadn't. I went back to the sidewalk and continued my walk back home. But moments later, I saw the car again, and it was approaching me. The car caught up with me, and I saw the same guy. This time, I just ran backwards into some random person's yard. I didn't even care if they saw me or got mad or anything. I needed to get away from this guy. So I stayed in the yard and then crossed over into someone else's. This time, I was more careful, and eventually I got back to a sidewalk again that led to my house. I walked the rest of the way back home to my apartment building. Then I got inside and went up to my place on the 3rd floor. When I did, I heard a car driving down the road out front that had been pretty quiet. I was curious if it was the same guy, so I looked out the window, and sure enough, it was. He parked the car on the side of the street, and then he walked up to the doors. Thankfully, the apartment building was locked and he couldn't get in. So then he turned around, walked back to his car, and then left. I couldn't believe how he went through that much effort to try to get me to go into his car. And for why? I don't know what could have happened, but I'm glad that I got away from him. I'm not sure if he had been in the dollar store at the same time as me or not. I really don't know, but it was very creepy.